growing concern in the United States that our kids, when they graduate, aren't going into science fields. At least the number pales in comparison to countries like China and India. So in 2013, a bipartisan panel in the House of Representatives proposed the creation of a science laureate, a person who would get kids excited about going into science. Because kids always looked at Congress to find out what's cool. But the bill was blocked when the American Conservative Union pressured Republicans to vote against it because they thought that Obama might use that position to push liberal ideas on kids. How does science become political? Matt Herring asked, why does the collision of science and politics always breed politics? The reason science and politics mix about as well as oil and water is because they're based on two different things. Science is based on facts and evidence, but politics is based on values, which often has very little to do with facts and evidence. Science is the process of looking at the evidence and then forming your worldview around that evidence. It's objective and empirical reasoning. But that's not how most people work. Most of us generally start with a worldview and then find evidence to back up that worldview, and ignore evidence that goes to the contrary. We like to think that we're rational beings, but we're not. We operate at a much lower emotional level. We believe facts and evidence that backs up a narrative that we already believe, and we choose a narrative by what makes us feel comfortable and safe. That's our egos at work. The term ego has been used in many ways over the years, but the way that I use it anyway is that it's the part of our brain that creates our worldview. It tells us what's right and wrong. It's sort of a shortcut of logic that makes it so that we don't have to think through every single decision in our days, It's a defined set of core values that we rely on to make sense of the world around us. It made sense evolutionarily. If you were a hunter-gatherer and you're out picking berries and you saw a lion, and you stopped to ponder for a second whether or not that lion was a threat, you were a lot more likely to become dinner. But if you had an ingrained belief that all lions were a threat, you would immediately find shelter. And that would keep your ass off the dinner table. That unquestioned, hardwired belief system would keep you alive. But today our egos aren't caught up with escaping murderous lions. Today it's all about our core values, What's right and wrong? What's our belief system? What tribe do we belong to? What boundaries do we set up around ourselves? And once you have those belief systems in place, they become part of who you are. And it's very hard to change it, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Actually, studies have shown that if you challenge a person's deeply held beliefs, they're actually more likely to double down and become even more dogmatic in their beliefs. It also feeds into tribalism. Once you say I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal, then you're more likely to say, well, then I must think what these guys think. Again, it's that shorthand so you don't have to think through every single issue of the day. That same tribalism leads you to hang out more with other people who think the same way you do. And now, in today's fractured media and social media age, you can literally go your entire life without ever hearing an opposing argument. Which means that like no other time in history, we're choosing to reinforce our beliefs instead of challenging them. Choosing comfort over growth and belief over truth. And one of those values that we all have is trust. The scientific advancements that we've seen in the last few decades are enough to make your head spin. Literally, if you go back 10 years, you would be amazed at how terrible everything is. But as science has progressed forward at a breakneck pace, our understanding of it has stagnated, maybe even gone down a notch. There's a widening gulf between what the scientific community knows and what the general public understands. And that chasm creates an opportunity for vested interests to get in there to misconstrue and confuse people to meet their own ends. And that causes massive distrust. Scientists are seen as elitists in their ivory towers, trying to sell us on something that doesn't make sense to the rest of us. And to be fair, politics does bleed into the scientific community as well. There's a publish or perish attitude in the scientific community, where if you're not publishing papers, then you're not relevant anymore. And many people think that this can lead to a bit of groupthink. Scientists are working on studies and publishing papers that toe the line because they know those are the kinds of things that'll get published. Although, to play devil's advocate, if you have a paper that really turns the science world on its head and it's backed by solid evidence and everything, it seems like that would be a lot more publish-worthy than something that just says what a bunch of other published papers have said, but what do I know? Now, I'm leaving out a lot, obviously. When it comes to the machinations that define our public policy, the backroom deals, the corruption, the moneyed interest, and that whole thing, there's not enough YouTube channels in the world to explain all that. But in a way, I almost give that a pass. A politician that has to raise money to keep his or her job at least has a motive behind it that I can understand. It might seem despicable, but I understand it. But what about the average person whose salary is not dependent on them understanding or not understanding scientific ideas? We might not be able to do anything about what goes on in the halls of power, But we can reframe our own minds and understand the forces that move belief and opinion in ourselves and in other people. A question I've come to rely on whenever I get into debates and arguments with people is simply asking, what would it take to change your mind? What would need to happen? What evidence would you need to see in order to make you reconsider your belief or your opinion? Because if the answer to that is just nothing, then you're not coming to it from a place of truth. You're coming to it from a place of dogma. Only when we have that awareness of what's going on inside ourselves can we finally move forward. This question is an example of one of the perks that you can get as a Patreon supporter. Matt is a supporter on Patreon, and I actually just met him on a video chat recently. Hey dude. By the way, don't call him David, he hates that. If you'd like to support the channel and get some cool perks like Matt did, just go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. And that's it for today. You guys go out there and have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next time. Love you guys. Take care.